Also board chair of the CFC Foundation. Before we get started with the volunteerism panel, I do have a couple of announcements in addition to Elizabeth. First, if anyone has any questions about their CFC account, please contact the Central Campaign Administrator directly at support@cfccharities.org. That's support@cfccharities.org. And if you have any questions on CFC rules and regulations, those should go directly to OPM at cfc@opm.gov. Again, that's cfc@opm.gov. And as Elizabeth had mentioned, we're also pleased to announce that in addition to the sessions for the questions and answers for today's presentations that will be held at 4 p.m. Eastern, we have added a third breakout session. Due to the request during yesterday's chat, a breakout session of the CFC giving system has been added to the agenda for today. Jen Howard, Vice President and COO of MPMA Incorporated, will be providing a demo of the giving site so that participating charities can see what the giving experience is like for both federal employees and retirees. So if you would like to attend, please join that breakout room at 4 p.m. Eastern. So now I'm going to turn it over to Samantha Wessel, Manager of Volunteer Engagement at United Way of the National Capital Area, to begin today's panel. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Robin. As Robin mentioned, we're on day 3 of this incredible series of training presentations. So I hope you've all already had a chance to gain some valuable insight from the sessions earlier this week. And I look forward to sharing more about volunteerism in our session today. As Robin mentioned, my name is Samantha Wessel. I am from the United Way of the National Capital Area. I'm our Manager of Volunteer Engagement, and I'm a Certified Volunteer Administrator. Today, we are excited to have curated for you a panel of brilliant individuals who are here to share their best practice recommendations around volunteerism in the CFC. We're excited to have with us today Vanessa Bell, Operations Specialist from the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, Tina Labadouche, CFC Program Manager, and Ciera Barnes, Volunteer Program Manager from the National Security Agency, and Megan Curran, Partnership Engagement Manager from the Capital Area Food Bank. Welcome to our panelists, and thank everyone for being here. So people who volunteer at an organization or a charity are more likely to also donate financially to that organization. And that gift of time has an average value of $31.80 per hour across the country, according to Independent Sector this year. Which means that if your team or charity has 100 volunteer hours recorded in a year, the value of that time could be over $3,000. Additionally, recent research by the U.S. Census Bureau and AmeriCorps has also demonstrated that there's been a 7% decline in formal volunteerism across the country since the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. With women, Generation X, and families with children in the home are some of the most likely individuals to volunteer. Further, the volunteer landscape as a whole is changing. A recent study found that almost half of all volunteers are serving at more than one charity, and 9% of those volunteers are giving their time to 4 or more organizations. Younger generations are more likely to give their time to more organizations, which means that charities need to be building flexibility and adaptability into their volunteer programs to facilitate ongoing recruitment of those younger generations. And further, 67% of volunteers said that their connection to and belief in an organization's mission is vital to their decision to continue volunteering. So engaging volunteers through the CFC is a multifaceted process that involves individuals pledging their time to specific organizations, federal agencies bringing their teams together outside the workspace, and charities engaging individuals in their mission. Within the CFC program, we're generally seeing similar declines and shifts that align with the movements that are happening in volunteerism across the nation. Throughout our panel discussion today, you'll have an opportunity to hear from individuals and organizations that are thriving in the faces of what may seem as disheartening numbers when it comes to volunteerism. And they're thriving, especially as we continue to move away from times of quarantine and back in person. So I'm going to jump right into our panel questions. And before I do, I want to just remind everybody, today we have a lot to cover in our panel conversation. We have some really great experts here, but we will not be taking live questions from the audience today. So if you do have questions that you want to ask, join us in that breakout room at 4 o'clock, and we'll be back online to help answer any questions that you have specific to volunteerism. We do have a couple of folks moderating the chat if you're having challenges with technology or anything like that that come up as we go through the conversation today. So Vanessa, my first question is for you as our representative from OPM. Can you give us an overview of the history of volunteerism in the CFC and what it looks like today? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, volunteerism for the CFC actually initiated in 2017. And as you recall, that is when sort of the shift of the CFC turned completely to OPM and not in the PCFO sort of world that we had before. And that initiated with an executive order from President Obama. That executive order is 13743, and I actually have a link to that if anybody wants to read that in totality. But that allowed for CFC, it gave CFC the authority to solicit volunteer time from employees, and it also at the same time included being able to gather recurring gifts from retirees. So it kind of all happened at the same time. So that's pretty much the history so far. It doesn't mean that there weren't other programs within the federal government that did volunteer work, because there were, there are many other programs to talk about. But in terms of CFC and how it formally initiated volunteerism in CFC, that was in 2017.
Awesome. Thanks, Vanessa. Can you tell us a little bit about how federal employees are pledging hours in the CFC portal and what that process looks like and how those hours are calculated and turned into data points?
And it varies by different agencies, but I can tell you the statistics that I have so far. Federal employees have donated $11.6 million worth of volunteer time, and that accounts for about 500,000 hours actually pledged. And as you mentioned, Sam, very clearly that obviously the pandemic, kind of shook that up for all of us, for both federal employees as well as it did the charities themselves. But we are seeing an uprise in volunteer time as employees are now returning to work. And I think that it's 84,615 hours were actually pledged in 2023, and that was the increase. That was the first increase we've had since the pandemic years. And we also do have additional options for group projects and charities to tell us what kinds of jobs they need and so on and so forth. So the aim to improve recruitment of interested employees is ongoing, sort of a work in progress.
For sure, as I'm sure it is for both the agencies that are on the call today, as well as our charities and our nonprofit organizations. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's really interesting to understand as a volunteer manager that within the CFC program, folks are pledging themselves. They'll say, I'm going to donate, or I'm going to give 10 hours or 15 hours to this particular organization. And so it can be a really unique way for charities to be able to connect with individuals who either are already volunteering with them or are interested in volunteering with their program. So I think it's a really great tool that we can have and take access to. Ciera, my next question is for you. So the NSA is unique in that you all have developed the first volunteer program in a federal agency. So tell us a little bit about the volunteerism and why your agency has chosen to put a valuable focus on volunteerism within your employee base.
Okay, well, thank you, Sam. That's a great question. So as Vanessa was saying, the CFC, they started volunteering in 2017. Well, NSA, we actually started volunteering in 2016. One of our employees came up with the volunteer program as part of her doctorate program. And it ended up being loved so much that OPM picked it up and rolled it out federal wide. So NSA actually was the first federal agency to officially have a volunteer program. And with ours, what we do is we allow our employees to use some of their excused absence, part of their morale building activity hours, MBA hours, during their workday to go out and volunteer in the community. They do use the CFC approved charities, and that's because we know that they have been vetted. They're legitimate charities. And we, as the program manager, I never tell an employee which charity to go to. They have a process where it's a 7-step process where they get to pick their own charities, they pick their own causes. I reach out to the charities myself and set up everything for them, and then they go out and volunteer at one of the CFC approved charities. Our civilian employees are able to volunteer with their hours, their morale building activity hours. Our military members are able to volunteer with our program, and so are our contractors. They can volunteer with the civilians and military employees. They just can't come directly to us and have us set one up for them. They can't charge the contract either, but they are able to go out. And we make it a whole family event. If you want to bring your children or other family members to a volunteering event and you're an NSA employee, you are welcome to do that. We serve the charities that are within a 50-mile radius of NSA, which is over 300 approved, CFC approved charities. So that is a lot of charities that are options for our employees. And as Samantha was saying, some of the stats have gone down since COVID, and we noticed that as well. So in 2021, we were trying to get back into the groove of volunteering because absolutely no volunteering happened in 2020. In 2021, we only had 127 hours of volunteering throughout our agency. And that was mostly because a lot of people wanted to do in person, but a lot of charities weren't doing in person. We did end up getting some, and one of the charities is actually online right now. They've already direct messaged me, so hello. But we were able to do one in person. We've done a few virtual. And then in 2022, we did over 1,000 hours. And so this year, our goal is 2,000 hours because NSA has just, it's an agency that does like to give back to the community. So we're hoping that we can make that happen. And just quickly to let you know how our process works, we have a website, that's our volunteer website. Employees will go onto it and they will answer 4 questions and send that to us in an email. The questions are very simple. How many people do you want to volunteer with, or how many people are in your group? How far do you want to travel? What social cause are you interested in? And we do use the CFC causes. And then also what's your preferred time and date? Once I get that information, I reach out to the charity. I send them a list of the causes that they are interested in, that they have charities under them. They pick 5 charities and I reach out to them and I find out, do they meet the needs of the volunteers? If it does, they'll pick from whatever information I'm able to bring back to them and they will select their charity and go out and volunteer. So it's a very simple process. It's short and sweet, but it is a lot of fun. And because they're using their morale building activity hours, which means they have to have more than one NSA employee or military person with them, we've even came up with an app that'll allow them to find a match. So if you're really interested in volunteering and you don't have anyone in your office you're comfortable with volunteering because you're new, you just click on the app on our website, enter which causes you like, and then we will link you with another NSA employee that has similar interests. So we're just trying to do whatever we can to make sure that people at our agency are able to go out in the community during the workday and give back to the community, when sometimes some charities can mostly get people on the weekends. So that's kind of an overview of how we run our program and the reason we're so focused on that, because we want to demystify what NSA does. We want them to know that we are all neighbors in your community. We give back through CFC, we give back through volunteering. And although they go to the charity and their names are not known because everything is done through me, through my name, it is something that we report at the end of the year, how many hours were actually done, and convert that into dollars.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that insight into your program. You guys really have it down to a science over there, and everything is very efficient, which I think is is something to celebrate, and also to remind folks who maybe are on the call who are still sort of building some efficiency into their group volunteerism process that I imagine you didn't get that efficient overnight. So take your time, you'll get there, and just make sure you're keeping track of your data, right? I'm sure that's super important in being able to identify where you can be more efficient or maximize your efforts. And Tina, you know, in this conversation, and we know how volunteerism has been for your employees, can you tell us some of the direct benefits that you've realized by encouraging staff to participate with volunteerism? And do you have any best practices or lessons learned? Because I know you've been involved with CFC for several years now.
Yes, thanks, Sam. So I'm the CFC program manager for NSA, and I've been doing it for about 3 years now. And so I'm involved a lot with the charities, and Ciera and I actually work in the same office, so I get to see firsthand all the work she puts in for the volunteer program. Definitely worth every minute, and you can tell by how excited she is about it. But as far as our workforce and what the volunteer program does for us, it really gives the employees an opportunity to give back to the communities, not only where they're working, but also in many cases where they're living. Through this experience with the volunteering, they get to see firsthand what the charities are doing and how they're benefiting the communities. I think that experience is extremely important because then that, as mentioned earlier, that gives them another reason that they would like to, in most cases, contribute monetarily to the charity if they know what the charity is doing and the benefit to the local communities. So another thing that we've noticed with folks that are volunteering, it's encouraging and fostering teamwork amongst the groups that are going. As Ciera had mentioned, several people will go to one charity at a time, and they're strengthening this teamwork and this building relationship that they have amongst themselves outside of work. And really, in the end, that benefits us at work because that teamwork and they're building those relationships for their work at NSA. So that's a very positive thing. So best practices that I think are important to point out, having the employees select the cause that they believe in, that they're passionate about. If they really truly care about it, that's going to make more of a difference to them when they go to volunteer at the charities. Another key factor, I think, in a lot of organizations, a lot of agencies and businesses are doing this, having those 12 morale building activity hours to actually volunteer during the workday, extremely important. Not everyone has the flexibility to volunteer outside of work due to family commitments and other things. So having that ability to volunteer during the workday is extremely beneficial. One lesson learned that I'd like to point out, and I'm kind of directing this to the charities in some senses, when folks volunteer at a charity, I think it's important, and Ciera and I discussed this, for the charity to talk about their mission when a volunteer group arrives. Talk about your mission, how you can contribute to the community, what your organization is all about. Give it that personal touch, because our volunteers really want to know about the charity, not just the face of it, but more about how their dollars, where their dollars go when they contribute monetarily to the charity, and the benefits to the community. So we would recommend that for lessons learned for the charities.
Awesome. That's so helpful and insightful, and absolutely aligns with national standards and best practices as well, right? I shared that information earlier, that for 67% of people that are volunteering, being connected to the mission is what's going to keep them coming back. And we sort of all have this understanding. It's pretty generally well known now that volunteers are going to be more likely to donate to your organization as a result too. So building that connection is really helpful. And something that I would agree is a best practice that all nonprofit and charities should take on anytime they bring volunteers into their organization. Spend 5 minutes talking about who you are, what you do, and why it's important before you jump right into the project, if you can help it. Even if people get started because there's a little delay and people arrive late, take that time to bring everybody together at some point and just say, hey, this is who we are, this is what we do, this is why we do it, and we're so thankful for you to be here. And so speaking about the charity piece and group events, I wanted to ask my next question to Megan. So Megan, you represent Capital Area Food Bank, a charity that participates in the CFC and is very successful. And we know that you receive many group requests, especially from federal agencies for volunteer events. Tell us a little bit about how you manage those group requests and what, if any, additional programming have you created to help facilitate the larger groups maybe that aren't able to come on site.
Yeah, so thank you, Sam. We received so many group requests from corporations and federal agencies. I would say we probably get at least 5 a day. So I very much appreciate, I loved listening to Ciera and how NSA does it. I'm like, oh, that app sounds wonderful. But I also like that they all seem to come from a centralized place. Because I will tell you, one of the things that happens is there'll be agencies that have tons of different groups that come from that agency alone. And from our end, sometimes it's like, wait, are these 2 USDA groups connected? Are they all coming from the same thing? And so on our end, sometimes that gets kind of tricky because there could be 2 people from the same group, both reaching out to us. We don't realize they're connected, or 5 people from an agency that are all reaching out to us and none of them are connected. So that is always kind of the trickiest part with dealing with bigger groups. But they reach out to us all different ways. We have a volunteer website set up where if you know everyone on your team, you're able to register the group that way. So that's one way. They come to us on their own. They do all the work. They also will reach out to our volunteer team and schedule through them. Also, I've got folks that'll directly reach out to me. So it just all depends, but all of it for us aligns with our volunteer calendar, which we publish on our website. It always lets groups know ahead of time, when we're taking volunteers, how many volunteers we can take. But at the same time, that does get limiting because our spots will start to fill up quickly. So we have developed some additional things that we are able to do, whether that's kind of doing additional food packing or having garden shifts for us, or we have some workshops and programming set up, which I know I've hosted for several different agencies where they can come and volunteer and do the workshop, or set up a virtual version where, especially during COVID, where folks weren't comfortable coming in, being able to engage that way. But those are some of the ways that they reach out to us and how we are able to engage back with them.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that and for reminding us about the virtual piece of volunteerism as well. That I think we're all sort of ready and back in person as much as we can be, especially when it comes to volunteerism. But there is still a need and still an interest for individuals that want to volunteer virtually or want to do something virtually. And so everything from a workshop to an advocacy type campaign, to note card writing. There's some skills-based opportunities that can be brought forward virtually depending on the organization and the group that they're working with, I think is really important. Something else I want to jump in here and just let everybody know on the call, when we're talking about groups, we're talking about 5 to 10 volunteers generally. We do see requests for groups as large as 40 or 50 or 60 volunteers. And but in my conversations with Megan and Ciera and Tina, what they're interacting with most are groups of 5 to 10 volunteers, or maybe 15 or 20. And so keep that in mind as you're navigating your volunteer groups and your volunteer projects, as you don't have to get 50 people together to have it be an effective team building activity, that you can keep your group a little bit smaller and still get both that team building, that camaraderie building, that morale building piece will also make a significant impact in an organization in your area and in your service area. Awesome, thank you. So Ciera, my next question is for you. So you talked a little bit about the causes and things like that, but tell me the kinds of volunteer opportunities you're looking for or your employees are looking for, and which opportunities have the highest engagement generally when you secure them.
Okay, well, you took the words right out of my mouth as far as the group size.
Okay.
So we do usually have groups between 5 to 10, depending on location. Some of the locations we go to may accept up to 15 to 30, but on average around 5 to 10. And it also doesn't really matter how many people come, because I did have a group of soldiers. It was only 3 of them, and they did so much work. The charity was so happy that they were able to go through this large room and get rid of a lot of things for them. It's a homeless shelter, and they were moving to a different location. And those 3 people did a lot. So the size doesn't really matter, just kind of what the charity needs. But the type of opportunities that we're looking for, that the employees are looking for, are usually one-time opportunities. So they're not looking for charities that want them to sign up for a 6-month reoccurring activity. It's a one-time during the week, Monday through Friday. And usually they'll last between 1 hour to 4 hours. That's what they're usually looking for. And the type of opportunities that get the highest engagement is, of course, pets. Everybody loves animals. So the animal and welfare cause is probably on every single email I receive. In the spring and summertime, we do get a lot that are interested in environmental and outdoor activities. So we've gone to some refuges and done some work with outdoor activities. And then the food banks. The food banks are year round. They get a lot of engagement. More so at the end of the year. People are really trying to either burn their morale building activity hours because they don't roll over, or they're just in the more giving spirit. So they really want to give back to food banks and do a lot of sorting at the different food banks in the area. But we've also started to go out, and once one group goes out and does something, and then what I do is I go to the activities and I take pictures, and then I come back and I put them in a PowerPoint and send it to the group. So once people tell other people, oh, I did this, I did that, then they want to start trying different things. So we've had a few groups go to a charity that deals with people with mental and physical disabilities. And we ate lunch with them and played bingo with them multiple times. That's one of my favorite places to go. And groups have heard about it and now they want to go. So once a charity has the volunteers, as Tina was saying, with them, really take time to tell you their mission. They're going to go back and tell everybody how much fun they had. And you never know how that could bring in more donations or even bring in more volunteers. So definitely take that time when they're in front of you. But yeah, those are the activities that most people are interested in.
Awesome. Thank you. And it really just goes to show that there's a wide range of interest too. Like, of course, people love animals and the environment. They want to get out of their offices usually, right? But every cause is important, and every volunteer activity, I'm sure that you have projects that touch on every one of the causes within the CFC every year, if not multiple within each cause. So definitely something to consider for there, whether you're organizing your team to go out to volunteer or you're on the charity end for that piece. All right, Megan, I'm coming back to you with my next question. So we talked a little bit about group size and, being another charity in the room that receives group requests from volunteers, we know it can range from around 5 volunteers to up to 50 volunteers. So as an organization that receives a lot of group requests, how do you manage expectations when you have a group request coming in and still create a meaningful and rewarding experience that benefits both you and the volunteers?
Yeah, so I liked when Ciera was talking about the group of 3 that went in and did so much. I will tell you, we love our military volunteers. They get super competitive. They are very efficient. Like, for us, you put them around that belt, packing boxes, and boom, 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 we're going to be done. But absolutely, like, we appreciate small groups. We can take large groups. I find one way to manage expectations, we'll get a lot of requests where someone will be like, there are 50 people in my department. I need 50 spots, which I love. I love that ambition. I love thinking everyone's going to be able to attend. But I try to have kind of a level setting conversation of, that is great. It would be fantastic if 50 people wanted to come, but let's, reel it back a little bit and be realistic. Like, have you done an event like this before? And if so, how many people attended? Is this the first time your team is ever doing that? If so, we need to scale back a little bit too. And just helping them realize there are some people who can't come. There's some people who just might not be interested in coming, which is fine too, but really setting a realistic number and amount of people. And that benefits a couple different ways. It benefits the agency in the way that they then aren't stressed when people start saying no and they're like, oh my goodness, I promised Capillary Food Bank I was going to bring this many people and I can't find them. What am I going to do? It also helps us because when we book like 35 spots for a group and only 5 people end up showing up, A, it's hard to get the work done then, but B, that's 25 people we've had to say no to that have also reached out wanting to support us. So it's just kind of level setting on both sides of just being realistic of how many people that you want to bring. None of us are going to be mad at you if it's a smaller group, like that is fine, but being able to have that honest conversation and set realistic expectations of, I think this many people are going to come. And I will tell you, usually with groups that come year after year, their numbers increase year after year. As Ciera was saying, you know, having those pictures up, people hear about it. They get excited. They're like, oh, that team did that and that looked great. We want to do it too. Or, you know, my teammates did it last year and I couldn't make it, but they had so much fun. We want to do it this next year. So I think it's just knowing your team, knowing if this is new or something you do all the time, and just having a realistic expectation of how many people you actually think want to participate. And that takes a lot of stress off both you as the planner, but also the nonprofit in regards to knowing how many people to expect.
Awesome. Yeah, I think being open to having that conversation on both sides is really a valuable tool and a valuable activity to have in the planning process for creating a group event, because it is something where you know, if you aren't having that conversation either internally within the agency or with the nonprofit partner, it can be a little stressful when you have a mountain of work that you need to get done and you know how many people it takes and how many hands it takes and how tough it can be to fill those spots at the last minute. So appreciate that insight, Megan. I think that's really helpful. Tina, we've heard a little bit about this, but can you dig in a little bit more and share a little bit more detail about how you all find the organizations that your staff volunteer with and the criteria that you're looking for before you make a connection with a charity for a volunteer project?
Okay, I know Ciera has covered some of this information, but essentially, first and foremost, that we're looking for charities that have identified they have volunteer opportunities. And like Ciera had mentioned, a lot of the opportunities we're looking for are in person at this point and during the week. So that's first and foremost, the charities need to make sure that they're making that selection in the system, that they have these opportunities available. Second is the location. We have to take that into consideration as far as that 50-mile radius from our work location. The next is the cause. The charity, it's driven by the cause. Like Ciera had mentioned, we can't make recommendations on charities, even if we've been there before. The next item too is internally, we're looking at the size of the group because that's one of the questions that the individuals are asked, our employees are asked, is what size group? Because we don't want to commit to like a food bank saying we're going to have 10 people there and then we only have 2. As Megan has explained, it creates some challenges. They welcome the help, but we want to make sure that we can fill that group number. So those are some significant things that that we're looking at. After those minimum things of that nature are fulfilled, then that's at the point where Ciera is actually going to be reaching out to the charities and coordinating with them to get maybe a little bit more detailed information to ensure that if there's any need for some special accommodations, if we have any physically disabled people that want to assist, things of that nature. And as far as the group size, and the amount of time that our folks have, whether that be 2 or 3 hours, and the days to make sure that the charity has volunteer activities during the week and on specific days, make sure that marries up with those volunteers. So essentially that's it as far as the specifics of what we're looking for before contacting the charities.
Awesome. Thank you, Tina. I think really important there is that you're using the information that charities are providing through the CFC application and through the listing process, right? I think that's super important. And so Vanessa, I want to turn the next question over to you and ask, you know, I understand from our conversations that there are some changes coming to the listing process for the volunteerism part for charities. So can you walk us through a little bit about what those are and how you anticipate it will impact both the agencies and the charities? And I think if you can help provide a little bit of explanation on sort of how charities list their volunteer opportunities within this process, I think it'll help answer some of the questions that are coming about in the chat as well as we talk.
Sure. So now we have what we call a volunteer skills bank demo. This will actually be a good time, Elizabeth, for me to actually share my screen. If that is possible. I will do that right now. Share. And I think you can see my screen.
We can.
Let's make sure that you see the volunteer skills bank.
Yes.
I can't. Okay, great. So now charities have the opportunity to input not only their volunteer opportunities, but they can also do it by category now. So this is sort of like the first platform that, and let me just first start with this. I should have said this first. This is only going to occur during the listing phase. So if your charity is now in the appeal process, you will not be able to see this platform until your charity is approved, until you actually go into the listing website. But if you're already approved and you go into listing, you will see a platform sort of like this. It goes in, you could see here, if you chose yes and no, then it's not going to populate for you because you've already said no to not wanting to solicit volunteer time from employees. However, if you said yes to both questions, you will see this field populate. This is where you put your monetary value of your volunteer time. And I just wanted to add, I think I mentioned earlier that so far it's about $11.6 million that we've received in volunteer time. So be realistic and be accurate about the cost of don't underestimate yourself, in other words, about the volunteer time and what it actually monetizes as. And then you have the option here to add your skills, and I can kind of show you what those categories are on another screen, but for right now, it allows the charity to kind of pick the category, break down the detail of the category skill, the activity type. And I think, Ciera, you mentioned solo and group. This platform also allows the charity to put down if it's a group project or if it's a solo project. And there's just some stipulations regarding the monetary value here. And you'll see that in the system. These are just, again, some examples of what the charity would do. It breaks down again. And as you can see, I'm just kind of going through sort of the various screenshots that show the actual steps that the charity would fill in. Again, here it is here, the category, the subcategory. You could also now say whether it's virtual. I'm not sure how many organizations do that, but you have the option to do that. And again, whether it's a group, a skilled, or solo project. And this is sort of the skill bank. So this kind of breaks down all of the different categories. So now the charity can basically just pick and choose based on the types of activities that they have. Again, here is a subcategory that goes down again, breaks it down, whether it's, data entry or administrative support, giving the potential donor a little bit more opportunity to see what's there. And again, it has your zone. So the charity knows where you are. One really, really good tip is to just make sure that all of your contact information is up to date, so that whatever numbers or emails that you're posting within your listing, that those are available and accessible ways of contacting you once those employees contact you about the potential volunteer opportunities. And that's pretty much it. In terms of the value of this, I think it's incredibly valuable because now, let's say group projects, I do, and I think Tony's on the call, I don't want to misspeak, but I do believe that some agencies will now have the ability to sort of track those group activities amongst themselves to see sort of, kind of what's going on, who participated, who didn't participate. I'm not exactly sure about those details, but and if Tony's here, he can chime in. But I think it's going to be incredibly valuable so that now I think charities will have the ability to present more realistic projects. It sort of really breaks it down so that a donor looking at that will see, what do I need for this? Should I be grouped? Should it be this? Should it be that? And they know the exact details. So pretty much what Ciera is already doing. It's pretty much what we're doing with this platform. And now it's, sort of a wider net, if you will. So I think it's going to be incredibly valuable this year.
I agree. And I think too, one other question that I just want to clarify. We've spent a lot of time today talking about group volunteer events, but this information is also accessible to individuals looking for organizations to volunteer at, correct?
Yes. Right. Individuals as well as groups. And it'll allow you, we'll say solo. So it could be just yourself, if you want to go with other employees. Again, each agency has different a set of rules as to how their employees engage in volunteerism during the workplace time. So I can't really speak to how it's done. Absolutely. Because it's different based on agency.
Yeah, for sure. But it's also a really great wave. So I saw some other conversation in the chat for folks that are like, well, but we do weekends and we do evenings. And so put the information in, I think is what we're telling folks, right? Put the information into the system of whatever your needs are, because there are folks that are accessing this information for individual projects for their own personal time, as well as for stuff that they're doing through their work hours or their morale building hours or whatever their agency or their team has for them to volunteer in. So I think that is another really important piece for the charities that are on the call, as well as for folks who have individuals coming to them in their agencies looking for volunteer opportunities. Doesn't necessarily have to come through a group opportunity as well, right?
Exactly.
Thank you so much for providing that demo and showing us a little bit about what we can expect for the listing process for the upcoming campaign. I think it's going to be really beneficial for our organizations. Vanessa, I have one more question for you, and I just would love to hear from you. What do you think the biggest success of the volunteerism piece of the CFC has been so far?
I think the biggest success is that it works. We started something in 2017 and it worked. And I think that not all employees are able to give monetarily. So it gives employees an opportunity to do something. And I think that that's just remarkable. It continues to grow. Of course, the pandemic affected us all in these crazy, crazy ways that we didn't expect. But I think that that's, starting to make that shift. And, I believe that it works. That is the biggest, I think, success that we have, and it will continue to work. And it's a need, and we're fulfilling that need.
Absolutely. And it's a great way for individuals to engage with the organizations that they have access to give to through their workplace giving campaigns as well. I want to ask one last question, Tina, Ciera, Megan, any other tips or recommendations that you have or best practices that you'd like to share with the folks that are on the call before we wrap up today?
I would say one of the most important things for agencies, workplaces to keep in mind is awareness. Make sure your workforce knows about that there are so many volunteer opportunities, because quite honestly, before being in this position, I did not realize how many nonprofit charities there were even in my local area, in my community. So it's really opened my eyes to the need and just being able to go out there and make a difference in my local community at so many different charities. So just the awareness, making sure your workforce is aware of these opportunities.
Yeah, and I think my advice towards the nonprofits who are on here, if you work for a nonprofit, you are automatically a fundraiser. There's no way around it. That is just part of what your life is. And it's important to realize that even if volunteers aren't directly bringing in dollars, that doesn't mean they're not fundraising. For us, it's a concept that I call friend raising, and just how important that is. People coming in and talking about your organization, it makes a huge difference. You don't know who they're talking to. You may beget another supporter from there. I love looking and seeing people who have come in and volunteered and then have at different times brought in groups of their own. So whether they've led their agency efforts the next year or have brought in a group of friends or have come in and volunteered individually, you just don't know where you're going to get supporters from. And I think Tina talked about it at the beginning, the importance of nonprofits really sharing their mission at the beginning of the volunteer shift. It's just using this opportunity to gain more supporters. So not only are they helping you achieve your mission, you don't know what kind of supporters that you are picking up in the long run. So I think it's just important to keep it in mind that volunteer support is great. We need it, but that there are definite other benefits to it as well.
And I'm going to just piggyback off of Tina and Megan. When it comes to telling them about your mission, telling the volunteers about your mission, I've actually worked with a lot of charities where they started even giving tours of their location. And I find that to be so beneficial for them. And the first time I asked this location to do it, someone immediately went into one of their offices, like, sign me up for your newsletter. So you can talk about it, but really letting them see as much as they can see while they're there, it is really going to help you in the long run, whether they're going to go home and bring their friends, as Megan said, and bring their families and come out again, or if they're going to just drop some more dollars at this during the open season to you. Just really talk about it and even show them, because a lot of people are visual.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sam, I just wanted to add one thing. Sometimes we do get correspondence from federal employees who say they can't reach the charity. What do? We don't know what to do. And of course, our role in CFC, we don't, once we do this platform, of course, outside of that, we don't, coordinate the process of any volunteership with charities. So just to encourage charities to just make sure that they have the correct contact information and that the people at your organization are aware that federal employees will be contacting them about specific projects, so that people don't call and feel like, I did this and, like, for what? So just for charities to just keep that in mind, to have a plan on coordinating the volunteer process and also, as Megan said so eloquently, picking realistic projects that really people can do. These are people generally that might do this during the workday, maybe on the weekend, but it has to be realistic.
And Vanessa, thank you for that about the contact, because I am the one person that contacts all the charities for our employees. And there has been times I've had to try Facebook and try Instagram. Like, I've tried so many different ways, emails, phone calls. And sometimes it's dead ends. And I do have to go back and tell them, I'm sorry, I can't contact them, or I have not heard back. Right. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, so important. Make sure if you are a charity that's participating in the CFC, do, quarterly at least checks, because we all know people move roles a lot in organizations and we take on new and different responsibilities. And so making sure that the people that you want to engage in your organization have the most appropriate contact information, because that's going to set the best first impression. And it's also going to make, it's an indicator of what the volunteer experience is going to be like as well. So I think that's a really great piece for us to end on. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who's joined us today for this important session on expanding volunteerism in the CFC. And a huge thank you to our panelists for sharing their insights and best practices. We're so grateful for your time, and we look forward to seeing everyone at a future training session. If you're here for the event session that starts at 3 o'clock, stay here. It's the same link, the same Zoom room. Our folks are that are helping manage and moderate are going to work on turning this over and turning it into the event session now. And if you have questions about volunteerism in the CFC, join us at 4 o'clock. We will be in the breakout session, so we won't be in the main room. You'll jump in, you'll have an option to join a breakout session, and so you'll have the option to join our breakout session. Otherwise, thank you everyone for being here, and